Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into a story that feels almost ripped straight from a geopolitical thriller. It's a fascinating, almost cinematic look into the recent truce and, the escalations that followed in the Middle East. Our deep dive today is really zeroing in on the surprising and, frankly, often hidden dynamics between three key players: the U.S., Israel, and Iran. What seemed like, or what was presented as a straightforward peace initiative was, well, as we've dug into our sources, it was anything but simple. We're going way beyond the headlines here to really try and unpack the hidden motivations, the surprising realities, and the kind of strategic gambles that shaped this whole moment. So the big mission for this deep dive is really, did this truce actually hold? Or was it maybe destined to shatter right from the start? And maybe more importantly, who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes? Let's just jump right in.
It really is an incredible story, isn't it? Because if you think back, the initial public take, when Donald Trump first announced this truce, it looked like a clear diplomatic win for him. It seemed like a classic peacemaking move, right? Iran agreed, Israel accepted. Everything looked like Trump being the global deal maker.
Again, that was the narrative.
But our sources, particularly this really revealing report from the New York Times, they just bring this astonishing backstory to light. What we thought we saw, on the surface, that was just Act One.
Okay, let's really unpack this then, because what the New York Times reported, it just completely rewrites that first scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They revealed that Trump's decision to call for the truce, it was unilateral. Just him.
Yeah.
Picture this.
Yeah.
He apparently just picked up the phone, called Netanyahu directly.
Yeah.
And this move supposedly caught even his closest military advisors, like completely off guard. Imagine the scene in the Situation Room, right?
Mm.
And the context for this sudden, really high-stakes call is absolutely critical.
Right.
It came right after Iran's sort of cinematic strike on the Al-Assad base. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
The one that was so choreographed with pre-warnings to Qatar, to the U.S., making sure there were zero casualties.
Right, very deliberate.
That strike, even though it felt theatrical, seems to have been the clear trigger that pushed Trump to act so quickly and decisively. It was like a show of force that gave both sides an exit ramp.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Trump acting, almost like a lone wolf here. Our sources clearly show this powerful, sort of multi-pronged pressure campaign coming from the wider U.S. administration. This wasn't just a suggestion. Yeah. We're talking Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Stephen Witko. Remember, he was the U.S. Special Representative for Iran then, a key behind-the-scenes guy.
Right.
All of them were actively and pretty forcefully pushing Israel to accept the ceasefire. It shows a really deep desire within the U.S. leadership for de-escalation, even if it meant leaning hard on a major ally.
That's incredible. So Trump himself calls Netanyahu, and then you've got these other top U.S. officials, Pence, Pompeo, Witko, all applying this intense pressure. It really makes you wonder, why was Netanyahu apparently so reluctant? What made it necessary to use so much, external force for Israel to accept a ceasefire? On the surface, it seems like it would be beneficial.
Well, this is where Israel's internal politics really come into play, and our sources shed a lot of light here. It highlights the huge, almost overriding influence of the far-right factions within Netanyahu's government at the time.
Oh.
It strongly suggests the decision wasn't really his alone to make, or at the very least his options were heavily constrained by these internal political forces. The U.S. administration essentially had to bypass just dealing with the PM and engage with the wider, often more hardline political scene in Israel.
Right.
It's a clear sign of just how complex those internal dynamics are, where domestic politics can totally shape international moves.
And what's just as fascinating is how Iran reacted. On the other side of this, their acceptance was, well, incredibly surprising, especially considering what they were saying publicly right before. It adds another layer to this whole chess game.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Initially, Iran's foreign minister was out there explicitly claiming they hadn't received any offers, no mediation at all for a ceasefire.
Yeah, I remember that. Very firm denial.
Categorical, right. Said nobody had even approached them. But then, our sources confirm, as soon as the U.S. actually made an official offer through that crucial intermediary, Iran just immediately accepted.
Wow.
This super fast pivot from total denial to immediate acceptance, it's incredibly telling. It suggests a much more calculated behind-the-scenes reality than the public story let on.
That is a truly baffling turnaround. Denying offers publicly, then instantly accepting one. And you mentioned an intermediary, a crucial go-between. Who was that vital link here?
Our sources confirm it was Qatar. Qatar played that crucial intermediary role between the U.S. and Iran. quietly facilitating these direct talks at a really sensitive moment.
Okay, Qatar.
And that role makes what happened next even more perplexing. It gives us a real peek into the tangled web of regional diplomacy.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
because just after the truce was set up,
Yeah.
there was this absolutely bewildering incident involving Qatar. It feels totally counterintuitive, almost contradicting their mediator role. What exactly went down?
Well, it really defied expectations. After the truce was agreed, Qatar summoned the Iranian ambassador. And they didn't just have a quiet chat.
No.
No, they strongly condemned what they called a direct violation of Qatar's sovereignty and airspace. A very public, very forceful rebuke.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. Even more surprising, the Iranian president himself actually expressed regret for a missile landing in Qatar. He specifically emphasized Qatar as a neighboring country.
They apologized.
Essentially, yes. It was almost like they were bending over backwards to smooth things over, to de-escalate that specific issue. NBC News actually called the whole exchange a show.
A show?
Yeah, implying it was sort of theatrical. The public expected this strong, unyielding Iranian response to the whole conflict, but instead, they got something that felt, well, staged for public consumption.
That's truly bizarre, isn't it? Why would Iran, usually so assertive, with all the rhetoric about standing firm, why would they apologize to Qatar and treat them so carefully? I mean, yeah, they share that massive gas field, the South Pars North Dome, so there's a huge economic tie there. But this level of public apology feels different. It feels like a strategic shift.
It is different, and it signals a major strategic shift. Our sources suggest Iran's incredibly careful handling of Qatar stems from this crucial, almost painful realization they had during the conflict. Iran found out it was basically alone.
Alone?
Yeah. This profound isolation forced a dramatic rethink of their diplomatic ties and led to this pragmatic pivot. That shared gas field, absolutely a factor. It's an economic lifeline for both.
Right. Billions are at stake.
Exactly. Any serious diplomatic fallout with Qatar could have huge strategic and financial costs for Iran, making it harder to bypass sanctions. So the apology wasn't just politeness. It highlights a new vulnerability for Iran. It's a pragmatic shift, recognizing they need Qatar more than Qatar needs them now. That's a complete reversal of their usual power dynamic.
And it seems that show quickly turned back into real action, because almost right after the truce was announced, or maybe even before it officially ended, things escalated again. New strikes happened. The truce barely had time to take effect.
They certainly did escalate. It's a critical detail, shows the tension just simmering underneath. Our sources say that before the truce even formally ended, Iran reportedly fired 6 missiles at Israel.
6, okay.
And Israel didn't wait. They responded swiftly with an operation inside Tehran, a significant retaliatory strike deep inside Iran.
Inside Tehran, wow.
Yeah. And even after the truce was supposed to be active, it stayed incredibly tense. Israel claimed it intercepted 1, maybe 2, missiles from Iran. Haaretz reported that, suggesting continued attacks.
But Iran denied it.
Exactly. Iranian TV flat out denied launching anything. So you had this confusing, conflicting story for the public. And Netanyahu, meanwhile, was publicly vowing to hit back with a much stronger strike, keeping the rhetoric boiling.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How can a truce, negotiated with such effort, announced with fanfare, just fall apart so quickly into new strikes and threats? It almost makes you doubt if it was ever really meant to hold, like a dangerous game of chicken, even while they were supposedly de-escalating.
That's a critical point. And our sources suggest these immediate hits weren't just random spasms of violence, they were calculated signals. Yeah. Iran showing it wasn't backing down, and Israel responding to maintain deterrence, show its own capability, all while the truce was technically still there. And adding another layer of complexity, maybe revealing more about Israel's deeper strategy, is that really shocking event that happened after the truce began. Israel assassinated the Iranian nuclear scientist Mohammad Reza Sadiqi.
That's a huge development.
Yeah.
An assassination after a truce is supposed to be in effect. What else do the sources say about that?
Well, this wasn't just a sudden opportunity. Our sources reveal Israel had been actively pursuing Sadiqi since the war started. He was marked as a high-value target.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah. They'd even tried to hit his home with a drone earlier. That attack tragically missed him, but killed his 17-year-old son instead.
Oh, terrible.
After that, Sadiqi moved to his family's home, and that's where he was then successfully targeted and killed, along with his family. The determination in that pursuit is pretty striking.
Incredibly specific and tragic. But the timing. If they'd been pursuing him for so long, why carry out the assassination after the truce began? That timing seems strategically, well, curious. almost defiant of the truce itself.
This raises that key question. What does the timing tell us about Israel's operational state and goals right then? Our sources suggest that Israel's target bank, all their intel and strike objectives built up over years, was significantly depleted, or as they put it, exhausted in the first weeks of the war.
Exhausted. How?
Apparently, they'd worked for 20 years identifying these high-value targets and managed to hit most of them in the first 12 days.
12 days? That's incredibly fast.
It is. It implies an amazing operational tempo, but also a big strategic problem. What do you hit next when your main list is checked off?
Right.
So the Sadiqi assassination was likely a pre-planned, high-value hit they finally managed to execute. Maybe to secure a visible win when other options were dwindling. It suggests they were running out of top-tier targets, making this a crucial, if-delayed strike, perhaps to show they still had teeth even during de-escalation.
So it wasn't necessarily about breaking the truce with new aggression, but maybe finishing a critical item on their checklist, one they were finally able to execute. It really paints a picture of long-term planning. And speaking of figuring out real intentions, what do the financial markets tell us? Usually, conflict in the Middle East sends markets tumbling. It's almost automatic.
That's what's truly fascinating here. When that Iranian strike happened, the U.S. stock market actually surged, went up.
Surged. That's completely backwards.
Totally counterintuitive, right? For major geopolitical instability, especially there. Normally, like you said, markets tank, investors run for cover. So this raises a big question. What does this really weird market reaction mean? Why rush into risk?
Exactly. It's like the market was reading a totally different script from the public one.
Precisely. It implies that financial investors are incredibly well-informed. Maybe they have access to intelligence, quiet diplomatic whispers, insider briefings, or just really sophisticated analysis that we don't see.
Yeah.
Their rush to buy stocks indicated they had info suggesting the conflict would not blow up into a full-scale long war.
Ah, okay.
This strongly suggests that all the main players, the U.S., Iran, Israel, ultimately wanted and were working towards de-escalation, despite all the public noise and fighting. The market basically saw through the show.
So the public story of fierce conflict, of unyielding retaliation, in many ways, that was just each side trying to look strong or putting on a performance, while behind the scenes, they were actually trying to cool things down. That sounds really cynical, but maybe accurate looking at where the money went.
It's a very plausible read, given how the market reacted. It suggests this carefully choreographed dance where the public moves serve domestic politics or regional deterrence, but the real strategic goal for everyone was avoiding a bigger, uncontrollable war that helps nobody long-term. The market essentially called their bluff.
And that leads us right into Iran's situation. Because you mentioned earlier, Iran had this very stark, kind of painful realization during all this.
Yes. The really surprising and maybe most significant discovery for the Iranian regime in this conflict was realizing just how profoundly, undeniably alone they were, isolated.
Alone.
That was a critical and probably unsettling takeaway for them, and it shaped what they did next.
So what does that mean for Iran's future strategy, for its place in the world? If they genuinely felt isolated, that's a massive shift in how they see themselves and how they'll approach things going forward.
It means a fundamental rethink of their alliances and capabilities. Our sources point to a significant lack of support from major allies Iran might have counted on, or at least hoped would show up. Let's start with Russia. Even though Iran played a vital role in Russia's war in Ukraine, providing those essential Shahed 136 drones, a real game changer for Russia, plus that recent shipment of 400 missiles.
Huge military aid.
Right. Despite all that, Russia provided absolutely no diplomatic, political, or military help to Iran during this escalation. Nothing.
That's astonishing. You'd expect some quid pro quo, or at least some public support.
You would think. But our sources suggest two main, very pragmatic reasons. First, Russia is reportedly exhausted by its own war. Their resources, their diplomatic energy, it's all tied up in Ukraine. They just don't have the capacity to jump into another big conflict.
Okay, stretched thin. Makes sense.
Second, and maybe even more critical, Russia doesn't want to risk its valuable strategic relationships with the Gulf states. Siding openly with Iran would almost certainly alienate Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, major oil producers, buyers of Russian weapons.
Right. The money and influence there is huge.
Exactly. So pragmatic self-interest and wanting to keep ties across the region trumped any supposed alliance with Iran.
Okay, so Russia was out. What about China? Another big player, often seen as an alternative power center. Did they step up for Iran?
Yep. China also didn't support Iran. Our sources are very clear. China has much stronger diplomatic and economic ties with the Gulf states than with Iran. Think massive energy deals, huge infrastructure projects.
Billions and billions.
Right. There were those rumors about Chinese cargo planes delivering missiles, but those seem to have been just rumors, widely debunked. China prioritizes its huge economic interests and stability across the whole Middle East. Getting tangled in a war on Iran's side, that runs completely counter to their goals.
So same logic as Russia, basically. Protect their own interests first.
Pretty much. And even Pakistan, another country Iran might have hoped for support from, offered nothing either. So the stark reality was Iran stood alone against Israel, and by extension, against the powerful backing of the U.S.
Wow. So no external allies came through. What about Iran's internal situation and its own proxy network? Hezbollah, Houthis, could they help?
Internally, things are tough. The difficult economic conditions put a lot of pressure on the regime, limits their options. Plus, it's important to remember not everyone in Iran supports the government's foreign policy. Many see these conflicts as just serving the Supreme Leader Khamenei's anti-Western agenda, while the people pay the price through sanctions and hardship.
So you're saying the Iranian people themselves are tired of it, tired of the constant conflict instead of looking for solutions. That sounds like a major internal pressure point.
Absolutely. That internal dissatisfaction is a huge factor. The regime can't just ignore forever. People feel the economic pain, the social costs, and they question the leadership strategy when there's no clear win in sight.
Right.
And externally, even Iran's proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the Iraqi Shia militias, they just weren't strong enough to really intervene effectively or change the balance of power in this specific fight. Their capacity was limited, the end result of all this isolation. According to the New York Times, Iran's medium-range missile inventory was reportedly depleted.
Depleted, that's critical.
Yeah, it means their main offensive punch was significantly weakened, making their whole position even more shaky.
That explains so much, especially that weird dynamic with Qatar we talked about.
Yeah.
If Iran is truly alone in running low on missiles, suddenly Qatar's diplomatic role becomes absolutely vital. So Iran, which usually seems like the stronger one in that relationship, is now being super careful not to alienate Qatar. Why the complete flip?
Precisely. It's a profound reversal. Qatar's diplomatic weight is now crucial for Iran. Instead of Qatar feeling Iran, Iran now relies on Qatar as this vital channel for de-escalation, for communication, maybe even mediation, especially with the U.S.
Yeah.
It's a total flip of their traditional relationship. And it stems directly from Iran realizing, painfully, just how isolated it was and how its own military power had limits. It shows how quickly regional power dynamics can shift when alliances fail and capabilities run low.
It's like the whole regional chessboard just got rearranged, and pieces we thought were fixed are suddenly in very different spots. And speaking of dependencies, this conflict also threw Israel's own reliance on an outside power into really sharp relief, didn't it? Might challenge some common views.
Oh, it absolutely did. Our sources really lay bare a stark reality that sometimes gets lost in the talk about Israeli military strength. Israel cannot start, fight a long war of attrition, or successfully end a major conflict without massive American support. Yes, Israel's initial operations were described as excellent, very effective, but they were done almost entirely with U.S. weapons. Advanced jets, precision bombs, the works.
Yeah.
Sure, Israeli intelligence, Mossad, they played a huge role, showed incredible skill, but the fundamental truth is, without continuous American support, arms, resupply, Israel is, as our sources bluntly put it, militarily nothing on a large, sustained scale.
That's a really strong statement. It definitely challenges that image of Israel as this standalone military superpower able to act completely alone. So based on this conflict, that image isn't quite right.
Exactly. This conflict was a clear demonstration of just how deeply dependent Israel is on the United States for its high-end military operations and its ability to sustain a fight. And the ultimate proof. Israel couldn't end the war with Iran on its own. The U.S. had to step in. According to CNBC News, it was the U.S. that destroyed those nuclear facilities, specifically Isfahan, not Fordo.
Ah, Isfahan, not Fordo. That's specific.
Right. Isfahan is a major research and production site. Hitting it is a significant blow. Fordo is seen as more fortified, underground. The U.S. hitting Isfahan suggests Israel was maybe getting drawn into a war of attrition it just couldn't sustain without direct American help.
So the U.S. was the lifeline.
It was the critical lifeline, proving America really is the backbone of Israel's military power in a major fight.
So this whole chaotic situation with all these surprising twists actually ended up working out pretty well for one person in particular, Donald Trump. It's interesting how he kind of emerged as the main beneficiary.
Absolutely. The CNBC News analysis points to Trump as the first beneficiary here. He managed to sell this narrative to his base and maybe more broadly that he both started it, giving Netanyahu the green light to hit Iran, responding toughly, and then ended it quickly.
Right, the strongman narrative.
Exactly, and ended it seemingly even against Netanyahu's own wishes. This let him look strong, decisive, in control of a complex crisis, a very powerful image for his domestic political needs.
And there's that fascinating constitutional angle too, right? Foreign Policy magazine flagged some really big issues with how he went about it.
Yes, that's a critical point, really shouldn't be overlooked. Foreign Policy pointed out that Trump's actions deploying U.S. forces without getting Congress's okay, without a formal declaration of war from the other side, were totally unconstitutional.
Yeah, the War Powers Act.
Exactly. U.S. law is clear. The president can deploy troops short-term if there's an immediate threat, or if the U.S. is declared war upon. Otherwise, you need Congress. It's about checks and balances.
So he took a huge risk.
A significant, genuine risk. If that war had dragged on, even Republicans in Congress would likely have tried to limit his military authority. It could have sparked a major constitutional fight right here at home. That political battle might have been worse for him than the actual conflict.
So the quick end wasn't just militarily convenient. It was maybe primarily the best scenario for Trump personally. It let him dodge a massive political and constitutional bullet.
Precisely. It wasn't necessarily about a clear-cut military win for America achieving all strategic goals. It was more of a significant political win for Trump himself. The quick resolution let him look strong, decisive, in control, even good for the economy. Remember that stock market surge. And all the main players, despite the public fighting, were ultimately satisfied enough with the outcome stopping further escalation, even if for totally different reasons.
Okay, so the immediate result was a political win for Trump. But for it to be a real victory, as our sources frame it, there's a crucial next step, right? A much bigger strategic play he could make. What's that?
For a real victory, something lasting and impactful, Trump's next big move has to be bringing Iran back to the negotiating table to completely dismantle its nuclear program. That's the long game. That's the path to a truly substantive achievement beyond just a temporary halt in fighting.
But why would Iran agree? After all this, feeling isolated, getting hit, why would they negotiate on their nuclear program, their crown jewel? Seems like a huge ask.
Well, there are actually several compelling reasons why this might be the moment Iran could be pushed to negotiate, despite their usual defiance. First, their nuclear facilities were hit. Repairing them is described as complex, difficult, expensive, time-consuming. That weakens their immediate ability.
Okay, sets them back.
Second, while Iran does have enriched uranium and could technically maybe make a bomb without fully operational facilities, our sources strongly imply more, maybe worse, strikes are very likely if they just sit on that uranium pile without international checks.
So it's negotiate or face more attacks.
That seems to be the implication. They face a choice. Keep getting hit, maybe devastatingly, or talk. So this whole chaotic episode is presented as maybe the most suitable time for Trump or the U.S. to really push for serious talks, turn this volatile situation into a real long-term win by getting Iran's nuclear program verifiably shut down. It's a moment of Iranian weakness that could be leveraged.
Beyond Trump's win, this conflict also showed some broader regional shifts, didn't it? Subtle, but important. It really is impressive how the Gulf states managed to stay out of the direct fight, maintaining neutrality.
Their neutrality was absolutely a significant political victory for them. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, they noticeably did not open their American bases for direct use against Iran. They chose impartiality.
Why? What was their calculation?
Simple. These nations are laser-focused on economic development, huge projects attracting global investment, diversifying away from just oil. They want a stable investment environment.
Right. Vision 2030, things like that.
Exactly. They have zero interest in being dragged into military conflicts or regional proxy wars that would totally derail those long-term economic plans. Avoiding this fight was a major strategic success for them, letting them keep focus on their transformation goals.
Makes sense. It really shows where their long-term priorities lie. Economic stability over immediate geopolitical fights. What about other players, like Hamas and Netanyahu's own political future back home? How did this affect them?
Well, Hamas is now in a, quote, very bad situation. They have almost no strong supporters left right now, and our sources suggest if Iran does enter serious negotiations with the U.S. about its nuclear program, Tehran will likely just ditch Hamas completely.
Oh, wow. Abandon them.
That's the suggestion, which would leave Hamas even more isolated and vulnerable. As for Netanyahu, he's clearly trying to capitalize on the perceived win of hitting Iran. He's looking to hold early elections, use this to consolidate his leadership, and importantly, paper over the internal government squabbles and coalition problems that have been dogging him.
So, use the external conflict to boost his domestic standing. Classic politics.
Exactly. Our sources even suggest he might agree to a truce in Gaza to get prisoners back. That would please the far right in Israel, who are already happy about the Iran strike, so he could claim a double victory, hit Iran hard, bring prisoners home, all while navigating his tricky domestic political situation. It's a calculated play for his own political survival and advantage.
So let's say Iran, after all this, feeling alone, taking a hit,
Yeah.
what if they stay stubborn?
Right.
Refuse to negotiate on the nuclear program? What's next for them regionally? What's the long-term trajectory our deep dive suggests?
If Iran digs in its heels, refuses to deal, the long-term implication looks pretty stark for them. Israel will likely start treating Iran much more like it treats Lebanon. Meaning Israel would probably adopt a policy of striking any detected weapons systems, strategic assets, maybe even personnel, inside Iranian territory on a more ongoing, almost routine basis. Not waiting for big provocations, but more preemptive, attritional strikes.
Wow, a constant low-level conflict almost.
Potentially. The really painful long-term lesson for Iran from this whole episode is this profound realization. It is truly alone in a future fight. Not just missing major allies like Russia and China, but even its own proxies weren't enough to really help this time. It fundamentally changes Iran's strategic calculus, forces them to rethink their entire regional posture, their reliance on deterrence, everything.
That implies a really significant, maybe permanent shift in the regional power dynamics, potential new paths forward for everyone involved. It wasn't just a temporary truce. It feels like a redrawing of the map, or at least how the players interact on it, for a long time to come. So as we wrap things up today, we've really peeled back the layers on this incredibly complex geopolitical event. We've uncovered some surprising individual motives, these profound hidden dependencies between nations, and the sort of calculated strategic gambles that shaped this so-called truce and everything that happened right after. We saw how an apparent peace move was actually a strategic calculation, how supposed allies just weren't there when needed, and how even the global financial markets, those super-informed indicators, kind of revealed the real intentions behind the headlines way before the public got the full story.
It's such a powerful reminder, isn't it, that what we see on the surface, the daily news reports, it's often just a tiny piece of a much bigger, much more intricate game being played. Those undercurrents of self-interest, political necessity, strategic repositioning, they're always there, shaping events in ways the public rarely gets to see clearly.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a provocative thought for you, for everyone listening, to maybe consider. Given all these shifting alliances we talked about, the deep dependencies that got exposed, and these seemingly self-serving political moves that dictate even moments of truce, what truly counts as a victory in modern warfare today? Is it about military dominance? Is it clever political maneuvering? Or maybe just managing public perception? And what does this constant dance of power, where public statements often hide private intentions, what does that mean for the long-term stability of a region already so full of tension? Something to really mull over.
Indeed. It really forces us to look past the headlines and question those deeper motivations, doesn't it?
Precisely. We hope you stay curious, keep those questions coming, and keep digging deeper right along with us. Until next time, keep digging deeper. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to the Deep Research Podcast for more insights like these.